least once a quarter, a video on TikTok pops up of a girl sharing an experience of a girl's trip from hell, a girl's trip gone wrong. This most recent video on TikTok, the girl's trip didn't even start before it went wrong. You know, there's always this horror story about girls' trip, and it's always followed by a conversation about how being friends with girls and women, how it's so much more challenging than being friends with boys and men. And I'm here to say that being friends with girls and women is no more or less challenging than being friends with boys and men. It simply comes down to the fact that the bar is in hell for men. There are so many more expectations of women and how women show up in female friendships that men do not typically require from one another, rooted in how we socialize girls who grow into women. And this perspective, this idea, is absolutely rooted in internalized misogyny. Aloha, beautiful humans. Welcome to my channel if you are new here. Welcome back if we are locked in. My name is Sasha, and today we are talking about girls' trips and the expectations of girls and women, how they show up in friendship. There's this idea that being friends with girls is so much more harder, so much more challenging than being friends with boys. Now, this idea is not a new thing by any means. Like, I remember in high school, in college, even in middle school, there would be girls going around like,
oh, I'm a guy's girl. I don't really have a girlfriend.
It's like, actually, I'm thinking about one girl and I need to check on her because I genuinely wonder how she's doing now. But anyways, you know, there were just girls who were so proud of the fact that they did not have any close relationships with other girls or women. And that's always been very weird to me, because while I have active friendships with both men and women, my most enduring, my most long-lasting, my most fulfilling relationships in terms of friendships are with women. And I think a lot of this perspective and this mentality that it is so much harder to be friends with girls and women than it is to be friends with guys is because we expect so little from men. And because we expect so little from men, this comes down to basic socialization. We do not socialize girls and boys the same way. We socialize girls to be nice. We socialize girls to take on so much of the burdens when it comes to maintaining friendships, maintaining relationships. And it's not just relationships in terms of friendships, it's managing families. You know, women take on this second load, this mental load of juggling and balancing so much more than men have to. And we are not as forgiving when women mess up, when something slips through the cracks, or there's some level of miscommunication. And that also comes back to how we socialize women and girls. Well, socialize girls who then grow into women, who grow up with this level of socialization that informs their perspectives and their expectations. And so when we are disappointed by our friends, by our girlfriends, it's so much harder to manage and deal with and just talk about than it is when we are hurt or frustrated or annoyed with our boyfriends or male friends, because there is not the same level of expectation when it comes to behavior. And so I want to go back to the girls' trips from hell, the videos that I'm seeing. Now, personally, I don't have a lot of experience with girls' trips, only because when I'm in my late 30s, late 30s, I don't know. How old is 37? I would say it's mid 30s, but maybe some count it as late 30s. Anyways, I'm in my 30s, okay? So I missed the boat on girls' trips. When I was in college, I was not allowed to do anything in high school ever. I didn't have a high school trip. I didn't have a senior trip. Around that time, Natalie Holloway went missing, and I have African parents anyway, so I wasn't going to be doing anything anyways, but I certainly was not about to be doing anything when Natalie Holloway went missing. Like, we both graduated in 2005. So I knew I wasn't going to have a trip right after high school, but maybe I could have done something with my friends in the summertime, but that popped off and immediately I wasn't going anywhere. So in high school, I didn't have a senior trip. In college, I had one trip. I had one girls trip. It was a cruise to, where did we go? To the Caribbean. Yeah, because I remember we went to Jamaica. So I think actually it was just a cruise around Jamaica, and we stopped off at different spots. I think it was like 4 nights, 5 days. It was actually really fun. I went with 3 of my closest friends at the time in college, and I was broke. You know, I didn't really have a lot of money, so I was working. I worked during the summers and on winter break, and so I think maybe I had like $150 to my name on that trip, and my mom very reluctantly let me go. Like, I remember the morning came and I still did not know if I was getting on that boat. I still did not know if I was going on that trip, but my mom like sat me down, you know, had the whole growing up, let me just tell you, growing up as a child of immigrants, especially African immigrant parents, Nigerian parents, is not for the weak. It is not for the weak. And that morning, my mom sat me down, gave me this whole lecture, and then handed me $100. And I was like, that's it? So literally, I only had $300 to my name to go on that trip. And I'll touch on that a little bit later, because I think money is part of a huge reason why girls' trips fall apart before they even get started, because money is always a factor in the equation. But anyways, so that was the only one girls' trip that I took, and it went well. We didn't have no issues. We had no problems. It was a great time. And then after that, though, that was the only real girls' trip I went on in my 20s, because I was broke. Like, I didn't have money. And by the time I reached my 30s and I had money to be able to travel the way I wanted to, because I don't believe in going on vacation with a few coins in your pockets. Like, when y'all on vacation, I don't want to be thinking about money. If I want to buy something, if I want to go somewhere, I'm going to be doing just that. I'm not going to be penny pinching. I'm not going to be counting how many excursions I can go on, how much food I can eat for the day. I don't want to budget. When I'm on vacation, there is no budget. Snow Bay hates that so much. Because he is one of those people, like, he just be penny pinching, okay? And I'm just like, no, ball outrageous. And I guess you need that balance in a relationship. But yeah, I don't believe in going on. Him and I travel the same way. So it's really nice, because even though I'm like, ball outrageous, and he's like, okay, let's not get crazy. I do appreciate that he wants to, when we go on vacation, we're not penny pinching. We're not thinking about every single dime or anything like that. Like, that's not stopping. The cost of something is not stopping what we do. And I really like that. That's like the way I like to travel. But anyways, I was in my 20s. I didn't have no money. Then when I finally got to the age where, you know, in my 30s, where I felt comfortable and to travel the way I wanted to take international trips the way I wanted to, by the time I got to that point in life, all of my friends had been married and they have kids, so their budget has changed and they're not able to vacation the way we want. Like, I remember one year for one of my friends' bachelorette parties. Let me not roll my eyes at this. I don't know if they're watching this video. I don't think any of my friends want. Anyways, one of my friends' bachelorette party, they wanted to turn it into a family trip. We all rent out a cabin and we just go and chill on the lake, and then they bring their friends. I was like, this is a bachelorette party, not a family vacation. And I thought it was just very tacky, rude, and selfish of the people who recommended it. If I'm being totally honest, it was tacky, rude, and selfish. Her bachelorette party is not the time you be planning your vacation for. And why are your husbands and your kids here? Like, get all the way out of here. But anyways, yeah, so by the time I got to my 30s, I'm in my 30s now, I've only taken one girls trip. I think in my 30s, maybe 2. But the most recent girls trip that I took, it was with my sisters. We went to Montreal, and I don't think any of my sisters watch my YouTube videos. I know one of my sisters watches my YouTube videos, at least my shorts. So if you're watching, hey girl. But yeah, that trip, I'm not gonna talk about it. I'm gonna talk about elements of that trip, which is what I think is the issue when it comes to girls trips, and sometimes why they go wrong. And I don't think this is necessarily just a girls trip thing. You're not gonna find these issues exclusively when you're vacationing with just women. I will say though that these issues often don't make it to the internet when it comes to men, because again, of how they are socialized. We socialize girls in a manner that, when it comes to how they communicate with one another and show up in their friendships, because we do not socialize girls to openly communicate, they devolve to a certain level of relational aggression you do not see in male friendships. So even though these issues can arise during trips with just men, it will never get to the point, in my experience, what I have observed, not being on these boys trips, but just things that like my husband has shared with me when he is on boys trips, it will never get to the point that you will see men generally running to the internet to share how their boys' trips fell apart, because they talk about it at the time when it's happening. You know, men are socialized to be direct, to communicate, even if it isn't an aggressive manner. Sometimes we just let them fight it out, and that's okay. We don't have, like, when boys are tussling at a very young age, we're like, oh, boys will be boys. But if girls get to fisticuffs, all of a sudden it's like, that's not how girls behave. That's so unladylike, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, sometimes maybe we should just let girls fight. Like, maybe we should just let them scream at each other and yell at each other and box each other. Like, I'm not saying that that is an acceptable manner of communication, but I am saying that that is how we let boys deal with their issues. So why don't we let women and girls deal with their issues that way? Especially if we see that they be fighting and then they're back to it the next day. They're friends, they move past it. I often see that in relationships with boys and men, and I think that is because of how we socialize girls and women. But anyways, my experience with girls trips, I'm not going to talk about that trip with my sisters out of respect for my sisters, but there were issues during that trip that I frequently see it's a common thread when I watch these videos of girls trips falling apart, and I really think it comes down to two main things: communication and money. So we're gonna start with money, because I've already touched on that a little bit. If you do not have enough money to go on a trip where you can't get yourself out of an emergency, you cannot afford that trip. I think there are a lot of people who go out of the country or on trips period within the country with maybe $300, $400, $500 to their name. And I don't understand that, because anything could happen. And looking back on it, when I took that cruise my senior year of college, I could not afford that trip. I only had $300, maybe a little bit more than $300 to my name. Now, granted, it was an all-inclusive package, so I didn't have to pay for food. Drinks were covered. And my friends, like, two of them came from really wealthy families. One of them, she didn't come from a wealthy family. Like my family, her family was middle class, but they gave her a credit card. And so they, to help her build her credit, they got her a credit card, but they also expected her to make the payments on that. So she knew she wasn't about to go on this trip and ball outrageous. So because our wealthier friends understood our situation, they were like, I didn't take advantage of it by any means, but there were some nights where I was like, we wanted to go out and like drink. And I was like, I don't really know if I could afford to, you know, pay for the drinks. And they were like, don't worry about it. You know, so if you have friends like that who are going to cover you and not hold it over your head, that's wonderful. But at the same time, I couldn't have afforded, I could not afford that trip. And if it wasn't for my friends, like covering my drinks, like, cause I could pay for my excursions, but they really don't want to go to any excursions anyway. Like I don't even count that as a trip to Jamaica, because I went to Jamaica, was it 2019, 2020? No, I think I was in Jamaica in 2022. I don't know. At some point I went to Jamaica over the past 5 years. That's what I will say was my first trip to Jamaica, because I could experience it the way I wanted to. I don't really regard my trip on that cruise as my first time in Jamaica, because we were only docked for a few hours. And some people believe cruises are like travel trips, but if you're not able to stop at port and really go out and explore the city, that's just my opinion though. I'm not trying to shit on the way anybody traveled. If you only do cruises and you love that because it allows you to explore, that's your vibe. I'm not judging. I'm just saying, for me, I didn't really count that as me going to a country and really experiencing it, because there's a very specific and particular way I like to experience a country. But anyways, what is it? Yeah, a lot of these trips, when they devolve, it comes down to money, because someone on the trip cannot afford something and people don't maybe necessarily want to pay their friend's way. And it is an insult now to call people broke. So you have just some people who are, you know, trying to just, you know, everybody's trying to go viral nowadays. So they get on the internet, call somebody broke, talk about how their girl's trip fell apart, and it just becomes fodder for the internet. And that's really trashy in my personal opinion. But at the same time, you have to take personal accountability and responsibility. And you can't just go on a trip and expect everybody to pay for you. I think it's okay if you go on the trip and you say, oh, I can't afford to do this, I can't afford to do that, I'm not going to go on this excursion, I'm not going to go on that excursion. I think that's fine. However, if your lack of funds is negatively impacting the trip, you shouldn't have gone on that trip. I think we need to be more realistic about what we can and what we can't afford. And just because you can cover the payments to make it to the trip, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can afford the trip, right? So you just have to be mindful. I think money is always a factor in the equation because we don't really talk about money in America. Like, it's taboo to talk about money, but I think like more people should be honest and open about their financial situation. And if you have a friend that's willing to pay for you and cover your costs on that trip, that's real nice, and that's a good friend you have there. But it shouldn't be an expectation just because somebody is your friend to pay your way, you know, or a family member or whatever. But that's something you should talk about beforehand. And that's the biggest issue, which is what brings me to number 2, and what I believe to be the most primary issue when it comes to these girls trips, is that there is a lack of communication a lot of the time before you even make it to the trip. And when you are not communicating, when there is miscommunication, how you solve that miscommunication can make or break the entire trip. So beforehand, and in this most recent viral story, the girl was communicating with all the other girls in the group. Before she went to book the Airbnb, she was like, I'm gonna book this Airbnb. Is everybody okay with it? And some of the girls responded, some of the girls didn't. Well, the one girl in particular that was the subject of her frustration, whole time this girl was not even her friend. That was a friend of a friend. And that's another thing. Y'all can't travel with everybody. Like, Snow Bay is probably the only person, and probably my older sister, yeah, but Snow Bay is the only person that like knows me through and through, that I can travel with 100% and it'd be cool. Like, we know each other's traveling style down pat. My older sister, I really like the way that she travels. That girl has an itinerary. She knows what we're doing, and I'm a big itinerary person. Like, yes, like I'm cool, like off the fly. I'm mostly a type A person. I'm a type B person when we get to the destination. I'm down for whatever, you know, as long as we hit the itinerary. But I will say I'm type B, I'm type A when it comes to planning trips. So I want to know what we're doing, if there are certain places I want to go shopping at, certain places I want to eat at. Like, that's all going to be dictated, and I'm gonna already establish that before we get to the spot. Like Snow Bay's 40th birthday trip to South Africa, I planned that entire thing in 2 weeks, I think, because we had to pivot really quickly. So I planned that entire trip in less than 2 weeks. A 2-week vacation to South Africa, I planned that trip in less than 2 weeks. I knew everywhere we were going. I knew the place that we wanted to eat at. Like, everything down pat. So I'm a very type A person before the trip. So I'm communicating, I'm asking questions. I'm like, what are we doing? That's how I travel. When I get to the spot though, I be type B. I'm cool. But anyways, yeah, you can't travel with everybody though. You need to know how people are. If you don't really know them very well, you should not be going overseas with them. You should not be even going. I would say domestic trips are a great place to start, but I definitely would not go overseas with certain people. And it's not anything about them as a person. It is just my expectations and how I like to travel. And I just know that our personalities or how we travel, they would not be congruent with one another for both of us to have a pleasant experience. But that comes down to communication. And so this whole trip beforehand, the girl's going to book the Airbnb. She doesn't hear from the one girl, the friend of a friend, the girl who's not even her friend. She doesn't hear from her. She says, oh, I assume that her silence was agreement, which, pause. No news is good news. That's how I operate that's that mentality that I operate with in certain circumstances. However, if you are about to make a $5,000 non-refundable payment and somebody does not confirm that they are okay, do not book that shit. Like, that's where she lost me in this story. Talking about, oh, well, she didn't say anything, so I assumed she was okay with it. Please don't assume with somebody else's money. If that person doesn't say, yes, I am okay with you taking $300, $400, $500 from me to book this whatever, do not assume that that is a yes. That was very ignorant on her behalf. And then after the fact, she's asking for money from this girl who did not even confirm that she was okay with the price of the, I think it was a cabin that they booked, because they were going to Aspen. It was a girls' trip to Aspen. And I think that they had a cabin. Don't book that shit. Like, please wait. Don't assume with other people's money. Don't assume with other people's money. Unless they're your husband or your wife or your girlfriend, or I wouldn't even say a girlfriend or a boyfriend. Don't assume unless you are legally married to that person and y'all sharing bills. Do not assume when it comes to somebody else's money. Okay, so anyways, I think it just comes down to miscommunication before the trip, and then how you handle the miscommunication when it happens. And that right there is what I want to talk about when it comes down to our expectations of female friendships, of our girlfriends, and how we socialize girls. We do not socialize girls to make it so that they are comfortable with direct communication. We socialize girls to be nice, and in that niceness, we stifle. A lot of the time, we stifle girls' feelings, and we make it so that they have to swallow how they're feeling until they cannot take it anymore, and then they explode, and it all becomes this big issue that could have been resolved if you had just opened up your mouth and just communicated how you felt. Also, when it comes to female friendships, we expect so much more from our friends than we do from our partners, our boyfriends, whatever. And this comes back to socialization and the idea of, oh, boys will be boys. So at a very young age, we expect little and less from boys. So when they grow up, boys will be boys. We just expect they are going to engage in certain behavior. The bar is so much lower, whereas we socialize and we expect and we depend on and we rely on and expect so much more from girls and women, that when they do something that is not in line with our expectations, or we feel disappointed or failed by women, it is so much more challenging for a lot of women to practice grace and to forgive their friends, even though they will forgive their boyfriend or their husband for raggedy behavior with a quickness. Like, there is a bar required and expected of women and how we show up in friendship that can often be very stifling, very frustrating, and in my personal opinion, unreasonable. And this goes back to socialization and that relational aggression that I want to talk about. Relational aggression is a type of bullying that involves harming others by damaging their relationships or social status. It's a covert or indirect form of aggression that can include gossiping, spreading rumors, and excluding others. Making fun of someone for their interest or appearance, creating negative posts about someone online, threatening to stop being friends with someone, giving someone the silent treatment, or isolating someone from their friends. Who do we see that with a lot? What do we call that behavior? We call that behavior mean girl behavior. Notice that there is no equivalent for when boys engage in the same behavior. We just call it bullying. But when it comes to girls, we label it as mean girl behavior because that behavior is okay with, it's expected with, or maybe we really do not see it with boys because they are allowed to channel their aggression and their frustration. They are allowed to communicate in very open and direct ways in which girls are not able to. There is a level of passive aggressiveness that I see a lot when it comes to women that I don't see when it comes to men. And I will say, I think some of this is very cultural. I see it a lot with white women to a degree I do not see with women of color. And so in my relationships with women of color, if something has happened or if something is frustrating them, or we just like are not really vibing, I am able to communicate with them and they are able to communicate with me before it even gets to the level of the silent treatment or we withdraw our friendship, whatever. I think over COVID, one friend, we did have to have a sit down and really talk about some things. But for the most part, it had never got to that point where it was that level of relational aggression with my with my friends that are women of color, because I do think that a tenet of whiteness and white culture is passive aggressiveness. So I experience that relational aggression and passive aggressiveness with my white girlfriends to a degree and at a level that I do not typically experience with my friends who are women of color. But I do think that not only comes down to socialization, I also think it comes down to culture, because as a first generation Nigerian American, I grew up in America, but I was socialized within Nigerian culture, and Nigerian culture is very direct, straightforward, to the point. F your feelings, we gonna talk about this, that, and the third, and it may not be discussed in the healthiest manner or the most respectful manner, but it will be addressed. And so that's how I grew up. So when I'm talking about relational aggression, I do think a certain aspect of it, especially passive aggressiveness and mean girl behavior, I think obviously all races of women are obviously mean girl behavior. It's not something exclusive to white women. I just noticed that when I have been on the receiving end of any level of mean girl behavior, it has been at the hands of white women. But that is just my experience. Well, white girls and white women, but that is just my experience. Your miles may vary. But anyways, we experience this behavior, or we see girls who exhibit this behavior. because of how we socialize girls. We do not socialize them to handle conflict in a manner that is just direct and open in communication. At the same time, I also think that we expect more from girls and more from women. I came across this video of this girl in response to the whole controversy around telling girls to love themselves on Valentine's Day. When I came across this controversy, I also came across a video from a creator who was talking about how girls show up in friendships. Let me actually post the video here so you can see it for yourself, and then we'll talk about it, because I have several thoughts about her video, and I think it really highlights exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to sometimes our unreasonable expectations of women in friendships, especially when they are partnered. Now, I do think that this can be extended to women who are mothers, but because I am not a mama, I do not want to speak about it from a mother perspective, but I will say I see this line of thinking when it comes to women friendships. And I think it is a little unreasonable to a certain degree when that friend is married. I won't say when that friend has a boyfriend, because I know that there are people who try to say that having a boyfriend or a girlfriend is the same thing as having a wife or a husband, being married. And I'm sorry, not sorry. Dating and having a boyfriend is not the same as being married. And if you disagree, that's fine. But anyways, let's watch her video.
I wholeheartedly agree with this sentiment. I think that this is a really good place to really round out this discussion. I see this a lot with female friendships. I've noticed firsthand that a lot more women will no longer hold space for their single friends when they get into a romantic relationship, more so than men do. I don't know the science behind that, but I've just seen it a lot in my own personal life. I've had to let go of quite a few friendships in my adult life because I no longer subscribe to being a backburner friend. You don't get to just throw me to the side like I'm nothing and then pick up our friendship like you didn't just do that to me whenever you and your man are on the outs or if you're single again. I'm worth more than that. And I prioritize my own sense of self and mental health to not allow people to do that to me anymore. You don't get to. I would much rather be alone by myself with no friends and no romantic partnership if it means that that's the way that people are going to treat me. I am so loving and caring, probably to my own detriment, and that's why it happens to me a lot. I always want to be this safe, inclusive space for people. I always want people to feel that they have an outlet to be able to express themselves and their emotions with validation. I would never want to invalidate someone else's lived experiences, even if I don't necessarily agree. Like, this is my friend, so I'm going to allow them to speak their piece, and if I don't have anything meaningful to add, then that's that. I thought this whole conversation was kind of crazy because, like, if my friend was single and they were just speaking about how they just feel sad and lonely because they don't have anyone, my first instinct wouldn't be like, just love yourself. When you love yourself enough, like, you'll find someone. That's not what I would say. What I would say is, look, you may not have a man or a woman, whoever it may be, and you got me. You got me. And I prioritize you and I care about you, and you're never going to be alone as long as you have me as a friend. That's what I would have said. But not enough people prioritize friendship. We talk about this loneliness epidemic in society, and we focus solely on the romantic aspect, but I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that people don't know how to prioritize friendship anymore. We don't prioritize platonic relationships. We don't hold space for different types of relationships in the way that we say that we want to. You preach to single people about how you need to build this community, but you're not helping to be the community. How are you going to tell me that I need to decenter romance when I'm trying so hard to have all these other elements and everyone's just worried about their own romantic partnerships? Like, you're not practicing what you preach. And I think that's the biggest issue that I have with all this. It's one thing if you're single and you have great friends, but like, it's even hard to have that at this point because people don't see the value in others.
So she brought up some things in this video that I agree with and I disagree with. So I want to start off with what I agree with. The idea of being the backburner friend is something that I will like. When I was younger and before I was married, it would really frustrate me. There were two friends in particular that I noticed every single time that they were single, they wanted to hang out. I wouldn't hear from them when they got into a relationship, or I would hear from them very sparingly, and they didn't want to hang out with our friendship. Just kind of like was on the outs, not necessarily because I was icing them out or freezing them out. They just had a new boyfriend. They wanted to spend all of their time with their boyfriend. And yeah, I did feel a certain type of way about it because I would be like, okay, let's hang out one-on-one. And they would want to bring their boyfriend everywhere. Now, if I liked the boyfriend, if he was nice, I really didn't have a problem with it. Like, for the most part, I think I'm at this age in life where I really like all of my friends. There's their husbands, their boyfriends. They're really great. And if I don't like them, I really don't got to spend time with them like that anymore because I don't have a lot of free time to begin with. Unfortunately, I just don't have time like that anymore the way I used to when I was in my 20s. And so now, because I have a lack of time, if they are like, oh, I'm going to bring my boyfriend, I'm going to bring my husband, I'm going to bring my kid, I'm like, whatever. Like, sometimes I wish you would not, especially the kid, if we're going to be doing certain things. But at the same time, I know that we are lacking in community. So not everybody has readily available childcare. You may have to bring the kid maybe Bae wants to come through. We're doing a brunch and they have been wanting to try this brunch place and they haven't gotten a free weekend, so they want to come to the brunch. That's fine. I am not at an age in my life anymore where I need to hang out with my friends one-on-one without their husbands, without their boyfriends. However, when I was younger and I wasn't dating anyone or I wasn't married, I would kind of feel a type of way about it. And so I do want to acknowledge that feeling of being the back burner friend is valid, because there are friends, and I'm thinking about two in particular, when we were younger, they would just drop off the face of the earth when they had a boyfriend. And the only time I would hear from them is when things were going south with their boyfriend, or he was hanging out with his friends and he didn't want her to come along. So I was like, okay, well, let me just reach out to one of my girlfriends. Now I'm thinking about it, there are a lot of women and girls who are very male identified in that way. It kind of makes sense to me though, because now things have changed. Like, I can tangibly see in my 30s the way society is changing in the opposite direction, because we no longer place women's value based on their proximity to or their relationships with men. This is a very new thing. I grew up in my 20s, my prime years of just adulthood, like late teenagehood, adulthood, my coming to age as a youth. It was a huge idea. It was just an accepted idea that if you didn't have a man, something was wrong with you, and oh, she can't keep a man, this, that, and the third. That was a big thing. That's not really a thing anymore. And I think it's because we don't really attribute a woman's value based on her proximity to a man, but that's a very recent thing. So a lot of girls were they were kind of pick-me's. It was okay. It was expected at that time for women to be pick-me's and very male identified. And those two friends of mine were absolutely very male identified. Their entire purpose was finding a boyfriend. Like, one of them went to college exclusively to get her MRS. She did work, she got her degree, she got her education, she's still in her profession. However, it's actually, well, I don't know if she watches this YouTube video, so I'm not. Anyways, she is still working in that profession. However, she was exclusively in college to get her MRS. We would go out sometimes and I'm thinking, oh, it's a girls' night. We're gonna have a good time. We're gonna get some drinks. And then we would get to a bar, we would get to the club or whatever. And their exclusive goal was to find a man to buy them drinks or dance with a guy or get a phone number or give away their phone number. And if no guys showed them attention that night, the night was ruined. And that used to annoy me so badly, because I'm not trying to go out and get anybody's attention. I'm just trying to dance and have a good time. Like, I remember I didn't really ever want dudes pushing up on me or dancing with me. I'd be like, get away. You know how you be dancing and people don't really club or go to the bars anymore, which sucks for y'all, because I loved those basement parties, bars, clubs, etc., etc. You be dancing and having a good time, and then you feel like somebody come up behind you and start dancing with you, and you would look at your girl and you'd be like, is he cool? Is he cool? And they'd be like, or yeah girl. But when they hit that, you turn around real slick and you'd be like, oh my God. I'm happily married, but at the same time, I do look back on those days with nostalgia, because it was really fun. And but anyways, yeah, so I had some male identified friends, and I did have some friends that I became a back burner friend to when they were in a relationship, and that does suck. I agree with her 100%. It does suck. It does suck. And I don't really see men do the same thing when they get in relationships, but at the same time, there is less required and expected of men, especially in relationships. So their behavior is not going to change. And when it does change, because I have absolutely seen instances where a guy will get with a girl and his behavior will do a complete 180. He's not drinking anymore, or he's cleaned up his lifestyle, and his boys are really upset about it. I've seen that before. So I don't want people to blanketly say, oh, that doesn't happen when men get in relationships, because it absolutely does. However, I think it is less common to see in men in comparison to women, because even though we are getting away from that place where women are identified and their worth is based off of their relationships with men, I do still think that we live to a certain degree in that society. And women are more open with their desire for partnership to find a boyfriend than men are with their desire to find partnership, to find a girlfriend. You know what I'm saying? So I think that it is more apparent and obvious because women are more likely to communicate and express their desires. Now, here's where I disagree with her and where I think that expectation is unreasonable when it comes to what we expect of women friendships as far as social calendars go, as far as taking on the mental load, managing relationships, managing friendships, managing families, etc., etc. We are increasingly living in a society that is very hostile to, and I won't say explicitly hostile to because I don't think hostile to is the right word / phrase, but I do think it is it does not make it easy for people to maintain friendships and relationships because we have so many more responsibilities outside of our friendships and relationships. We are now trying to balance work. We are trying to balance having a work-life balance, prioritize taking care of ourselves, our health. If you have a partner, yes, you have to prioritize your relationship and your partnership so you have less time for friendships and relationships. And if you have a kid, that time becomes very minimized and minimal. And so to expect women who are partnered, who are in relationships, who are mothers to show up in the same capacity as they did when they were single, that is an unreasonable expectation. And to end a friendship with someone because they are not showing up in the manner in which you want, especially if you did not openly communicate it to them, I think that is unreasonable. And I think that is an unwillingness to meet people where they are. People are always talking about community, the loneliness epidemic, the lack of friendship, the lack of community. But are you someone people would want to be in community and in friendship with? And I think when people complain about not having a community and not having friends, if that is a common theme in your life, I think you need to reflect on what it is you may be doing that makes it so you are struggling with all of your friendships. You are struggling to build and find community. Now, notice I didn't say struggling to find partnerships and relationships because while I do not think that there's anything necessarily wrong with seeking partnership, desiring relationships, there is not much about that is directly within your control as far as finding someone you want to be with for the rest of your life. You know, that is arguably more challenging than finding friends, right? So dating is hard. I think finding friendship is a lot easier than dating. So if you are actively dating, Godspeed, because the dating pool is just very challenging. However, when it comes to friendship, to expect married women, and to a certain degree, women in relationships with their boyfriends and their girlfriends, to expect them to show up in friendships and relationships as if they are single, that is an unreasonable expectation in my personal opinion. Is it okay to want to hang out with your friends one-on-one? Absolutely. I think that's okay. However, if you know, and if you are living in the same reality that many of us are living in, that there is no work-life balance or very little work-life balance and people are already just have less free time as it is, if you are unwilling to meet them where they're at and maybe go to their house and sit on their couch or just hang out with them, or be okay with wanting to go to a museum or brunch and their boyfriend or husband be there with them, if you are not willing to meet them where they're at, it's not that they're not being a good friend to you. It's that you might be not being a good friend to them and expecting more from them that you wouldn't your single friends and holding them to the same standard. Now, in my personal relationship, my husband, it's just my husband and I. We don't have any kids. We don't have any pets. We don't have anything. So when he wants to hang out with his friends, I'm like, go. Just this past weekend, he was in New York with his BFF. I was like, cool. I love that for you. I don't need to be there. Go. When it comes time to me to spend time with my girlfriends, with my friends, and I want to go to do a brunch and it's just us, or I want to go do this thing, I'm going to go. I'm going to be with my friends. But if he wants to come with, or him and his friends are trying out this new place and I wanted to try it, it's never been don't bring Sasha, don't bring the girls, because we have reached an age where I don't think that's really necessary. Like if it's explicitly a girl's trip or a boy's trip, hey, it's just us. You don't need to bring your husband. You don't need to bring your wife. It's just the guys. It's just the girls. And that's cool. And I do think that is necessary. And it's just like, you don't need to bring your partner everywhere you go. Like, I don't think you need to do that. However, when we talk about community, I don't know if people don't realize that most married people are friends with other people in relationships. And it's not necessarily because they only want to be in friendship with people who are married. It is because there is a shared reality. There's a shared expectation. There's a shared knowledge and understanding that if we hanging out, my wife or my husband is coming. Oh, that's cool. You can bring your wife or your husband, and it's okay. You know, there doesn't have to be that awkwardness of, is it just the guys? Is it just the girls? The same way when you are spending time with someone who is single. Now, one of my really good friends, he's still single. And whenever we go out to places, I'm like, hey, is it cool if Snowbay comes? And he prefers now that Snowbay comes because he really likes Snowbay and they get on very well. And that's the case with a lot of my girlfriends who are single. Some of them will be like, hey, I'm trying to go to brunch. And I'm like, cool, is it just us or is it Snowbay? I'm just asking for clarification. I'm not asking like, oh, he has to come with me. We're a package deal. I'm not saying that, but they'll be like, yeah, bring him. But if it's just us and they don't want him to come, it's like, yeah, just you and me. And I'm like, okay, cool. You know, most, however, people who are married, there is this understanding that you get me, we're a package deal now, because there is so little time, right? There is so little free time. And it's the same way, especially with parents. And so I know that with some of my friends who are parents, if I'm going to hang out with them, especially if it's a last minute thing, their kid is coming. And when I was younger, I used to have, honestly, no, I don't think I really had an issue with it. What did bother me is when they would use their kids as excuses to cancel on things. Like my baby shower, I remember the morning of, one of my friends canceled because her husband, her kid wasn't feeling well and she didn't feel comfortable leaving her kid with her husband by themselves. And I'm like, if you do not feel comfortable leaving your husband who helped create this baby, if you do not feel comfortable leaving your kid at home with him while he's sick, you have bigger issues than my baby shower. Sorry, you can't come. Thanks for the gift. Stay with your family. I do recognize, however, that a lot of people use their kids as excuses to get out of things. And so I'd much rather, especially if I want to see you, I'd much rather you bring your kid than you just cancel on me and say you can't make it. Like one of my friends, when her son was younger, and they're divorced now, but her husband, they traveled, right? So there would be some weeks where it would just be her and her son. And then when she was on travel, it would just be her husband and their son, right? And so it was just one of those weeks where her husband was out of the country. So we had planned this brunch and he had to take a last minute trip out of the country. And she was like, oh, I have to cancel. I have my son. We were like, girl, if you don't bring that boy, like, like, no, I never believe in people canceling when they have kids. I just don't like when they use their kids as an excuse to cancel, you know, like, but I also understand that a lot of people, the community is not there anymore. The community is shrinking, or you have to pay for your community now. You know, you got to pay for a sitter if you don't have family or friends to watch your kid. So I'm at this point in my life where I would much rather you just bring your partner. If it means I can see you when I haven't seen you in a minute, I don't care if you bring your partner. I don't care. Just bring them, bring your kid. I don't care. However, with a lot of people in relationships, I think there is just this implicit understanding that if we're going to hang out, my husband or wife is coming with me. And then when you get to the point where you have kids, your kids are probably going to be coming with you, or it turns into a play date. Like there is a cohort of my friends now that every time I see them, it is very rare to see them without their kids. It's very challenging to plan things without their kids. And because I don't really mind their kids being around and I love them and I want to see them, I'm like, yeah, bring your kids. Because just because I don't have children doesn't mean my expectation is everywhere we go and everything we do, the kids can't be involved. Now, I do think that there are places where children don't need to be at. I don't understand why children are running around at breweries. That shit is very irritating to me. And please leave your kid at home or just whatever, you know. Again, like I said, if I want to see you and you can't come without your kid and you got to bring them to the brewery, whatever. Weddings, I do not think kids need to be at weddings, but that's just my personal perspective and opinion. I had a friend who didn't make it to my wedding because she couldn't find anybody to watch her kid. And I was like, and she wanted to bring her kid. And I was like, no, your kid will not be at my wedding. But I also understood that meant that was a choice that she was making to not come to my wedding because of an expectation that I had. And she had to react and respond to my expectation. And I don't fault her for that, right? So there just are implicit understandings and expectations, I think, that differ when people are in relationships and are parents, as opposed to when people are single. That some single people, or that I find some single people don't understand, and it is an unreasonable expectation or a standard to hold your friends to. And when people are talking about their lack of friendship, their lack of community, if this is a big problem in your life, maybe it is you. Maybe you are part of the reason why you do not have community. And and I'm not saying that as a judgmental thing, right? I'm just saying it like, are you openly communicating with people? Are you being reasonable with people and your expectations of people to allow yourself to have friendships? And are you the friend that you want to be? Because listening to this girl's video, and I've seen a lot of videos from people saying the same things that this girl is saying, but it also seems like they're very rigid and they strict. They are strict. They have very strict expectations of people. And what I always wonder is why so many people are quick to cut somebody off instead of just maybe adjusting your expectations if the relationship and the friendship is worth it to you, and why some people are so quick to cut people off instead of maybe being just a little bit more accommodating to someone you say you love and is your friend. I don't think it's true that coupled people, married people, do not help to build the community. I just think their community looks different because they are coupled. A lot of people in marriages, a lot of people in relationships are more likely to hang out with other couples, with other people in relationships. What I think is the issue is if you are not accepting of that and you don't want that to be the case, that is your boundary, and you have the right to establish your own boundaries, but you do not then get to dictate how people respond to your boundaries, especially if the boundary that you're setting, it is just going to be more challenging for them to show up, and they may not have the capacity to show up in the way that you need them to. I think a lot of people have to understand, because there's all of this talk about my boundaries this, my boundaries that, but then when you enforce those boundaries, you don't then get to seek comfort from the people who were harmed or excluded or were on the receiving end of the impact of the boundary that you established. You don't get to seek comfort from people who were negatively impacted or who were impacted, period, from the boundary you established. You know what I'm saying? I don't think it is true, and I disagree with the fact that coupled people don't help build community. I think that coupled people, for better or for worse, are building community with each other. And if you are single, it is very easy to feel excluded from that community. But this girl is also actively saying she cuts off people who do not perform friendship in the way she likes, and the way she likes, she notices changes when that person enters a relationship. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You understand what I'm saying? You can't be mad that people aren't showing up in community and in friendships the way you want. But then you also can't be mad that you no longer have friends because you are cutting off friends because they are not performing and behaving the way you want them to. Like, I hope I'm making sense. I really hope that I'm making sense, because when I watched her video, like I said, there were parts I agree with, there were parts that I disagree with, but I think that she is talking about, it was very like dog whistly to me, but the way I read it, she was talking about female friendships, and a lot of these videos that I see, it's coming from women. It's coming from women. It's not coming from men. I do not see men. And maybe it's because my For You page is just very specific and tailored to me. It's very clear that I'm for the girls. I am a woman. I watch a lot of other female content creators. I'm not really following a lot of men like that. Like, I think there are maybe like a handful of men that I'm following on social media like that. But for the most part, I'm for the girls and I'm following the girls. So it is very likely, because we don't all have the same For You page. Our For You page is tailored very much so to us. It's for you. And so there is very likely men out there making videos of the same thing, complaining about the fact that they lose their guy friends when they get into relationships with women. It is entirely possible that there are videos being made like that and I'm just not seeing them. I am just not seeing them. And the videos that I do see about this phenomenon, it's more likely coming from other women. So do I think we should be prioritizing friendship? Absolutely. You need to prioritize your friends. You and your boyfriend could break up tomorrow. You and your husband could get divorced tomorrow. And I've seen it a lot of the time where women will break up with their boyfriends and then they have to struggle to find their footing in their female relationships because they cut off all of their girlfriends when they got with this guy because they were prioritizing all of their time with this guy. I've seen it also when women get divorced, they lose all of their friends because they were engaging in that couple community and a lot of their husbands, a lot of the female women friends that they became friends with were their husbands' wives. And when they got divorced, those husbands, his friends, chose him in the divorce, and the female friends and the wives just went with the ex-husband. And so they lose that community. They lose that friendship, So keep up with your friends. I'm not saying abandon your friends and exclusively only gravitate to community with other couples. That's not what I'm saying at all. Prioritize your friendships. But I think people also have to be understanding of the fact that a lot of people are just busier. We're not operating with a lot of time, and it is very hard to juggle and balance so many things, especially for women, because women are taking on the mental load. Women are in charge of the social calendars in their families and in their relationships. I cannot count how many times Snowbay will text me like maybe Monday or Tuesday and be like, do we have anything coming up this weekend? Do we have anything coming up next weekend? For a minute, we did have a shared calendar. I just stopped updating it because it proved to be very useless, and it's just me and him, and it's enough to balance. I can't even imagine having kids and trying to balance that too. And so women are juggling a lot. Women take on the mental load in their homes, in their relationships, and we need to be accommodating and forgiving of that. I think women need to be a lot nicer to each other, and we need to just not have as rigid expectations of one another, especially if we understand what we are experiencing as women. And I think that in part is why maybe some women are so unforgiving sometimes when it comes to small things, when it comes to small errors, because the boundaries, because the bar is so low for men that they expect men to mess up. But because women have to balance perfection, and because a certain level of performance is expected of women, we hold each other to that bar and we're not as forgiving to one another. So we need to be kinder to one another. I don't trip out when somebody doesn't respond to my text. I am a horrible texter, and I really hate this age we're living in where it is an expectation that you text someone and immediately get a response back 5, 10, 15 minutes later. I hate that. One of my friends, we got into it kind of because she was like, I really don't like that you don't text me back right away. And I'm like, well, A, I pay my phone bill, I pay the bills on this phone, but also B, I don't have my phone in my hand all the time. And then she was like, well, I see you post on Instagram, so why can't you respond to my text? Instagram, just like what I'm doing now, recording this video, posting it to social media, it is a one-way exchange of energy. When I post to Instagram, when I post to anything, it is a one-way exchange of energy. When you are having a relationship, or when you are communicating with someone in a conversation, in the scope of a relationship, especially texting, it's ping pong, ping pong, ping pong, back and forth. It is a two-way exchange of information. And if you don't have the mental capacity for it at that time, if you just don't have the energy for it at that time, it can be very draining. And so me, because I realize I am balancing a lot, I am juggling a lot, I do not hold it against anyone. If I text you on Monday and if I don't hear back from you until Wednesday or Thursday, at least you responded, and that's cool. Especially if I just know what I'm balancing and what I'm juggling. And so because I want people to have grace for me, I give others grace. And I think that that is what is missing in our society. Everyone is overworked, very stressed, dealing with the short fuse, and we do not give each other grace. We do not extend each other kindness, but we want kindness. We want grace. When we mess up, we want people to forgive us. So like I said earlier, are you the type of person somebody would want to be in friendship with? If not, maybe that is why you don't have friends. Maybe your lack of friendships and relationships, platonic relationships, is as a result of the fact you are not showing up and leading with the type of love, energy, and compassion that you expect people to show to you. Because when we point one finger at somebody else, 3 are pointing right back at us. So it is an opportunity to self-reflect and understand that, and just ask yourself, am I someone that people would want to show up for? How am I leading with love, kindness, empathy, understanding, grace? And can I ask for people to then, in response, return that love, kindness, empathy, grace, and understanding? It'll only be a matter of time before we'll see another video of a girl's trip from hell. And I guarantee you it will come down to 2 things: mismanaged expectations because of a lack of communication, and money. Time will tell, but summer is on the horizon. Spring break is coming up in a few weeks, so I'm sure we will see a video before the end of March. Before the end of March lets up, we will absolutely see a video of a girl's trip from hell, and it is just what it is. Y'all can't be traveling with everybody, and make sure your money is right if you are going to be traveling. And as far as like female friendships, we do need to prioritize our female friendships, our female relationships, my female friendships. They're the most enduring friendships, the most fulfilling relationships that I have. There is no friendship or relationship I've ever had with a man. I'm not talking about my marriage. I'm just talking about friendship. There is no friendship, there's no relationship that I've had with a man that has ever been more fulfilling to me and just has lit up my world and just filled me with the love, compassion, understanding, empathy that I needed at the time than a relationship with women. I think we also, especially if they are married or they have kids, I also think we need to be managing our expectations of our friendships from women and ask ourselves if we are practicing a degree of internalized misogyny based off of how we socialize girls and women. Are we expecting more from them because they are women and the bar is so much lower for men than it is for women? I think we just need to be mindful of our expectations and just be more understanding, a lot more understanding, and just be willing to meet people where they are at. And this reminds me that I need to text one of my friends' wives about brunch because she asked me this yesterday and I need to respond to her text. Drop that into the comments. Let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, peace out.